Welcome to the West Energy podcast, powering your career. The energy transition plays a crucial role in Australia and the world's future, and the success of this shift hinges on the people driving it. This podcast will interview a diverse group of energy leaders to provide valuable perspectives on career development, leadership, navigating the energy transition, and discussing strategies to manage mental health and wellness in a high-pressure industry. I'm your host, David Smith, the founding partner and director of West Energy and West Recruitment. With over 20 years of recruitment experience and a team that specialises in recruitment across the whole energy supply chain, we're really excited to bring you this series. So welcome to the inaugural episode of the West Energy podcast, Powering Your Careers with David Smith. I'm David Smith, Director and Owner of West Energy and West Recruitment, and I'm grateful and very excited to have Guy Chalkley join me on the inaugural episode. So, Guy, thank you very much for being part of this.
Thanks, David. Bit concerned I'm inaugural, but could be your last.
Yeah, we'll see. So we ran into each other the other day, and then the overall view of this podcast is to talk about obviously the energy transition and the importance of that for Australia, the globe, and at the end of the day, it's the people who drive it that will make it a success or not. I'm hoping this podcast series provides different perspectives on career development, leadership, navigating the energy transition, and something that's very close to my heart, sort of touching on mental health and wellness. It also aims to challenge the perception that you need to be an engineer or have an engineering background to be successful in this industry. And obviously there's some great engineers, but keen to explore today, your background, because it's obviously a little bit different to the engineering side, but obviously run a very large DNSP here in Australia and obviously have a great background. So Guy, to kick things off, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself in your own words?
Okay, this sad Australian accent is clearly a POM, so I suppose that's the first starting point. So 11 years in Australia, about 25 years in utilities, so that sort of ranges from effectively large-scale construction, airport, retail, to water utilities, and I sort of lumbered and fell into energy in Australia about 11 years ago, in Perth, in WA, so that other country of Australia, and then I've been in Parramatta in Sydney for 4 years, effectively. I actually did start from just a foundational piece, trained as an accountant, so you sort of get the apologies out very quickly, and actually then fell into commodity broking. So career's pretty diverse. Some may ask, have you ended up here when you could have been a commodity broker? But life changes.
All the things we'll unpack in this chat today. And what about outside of work?
Outside of work, we've got 5 kids and 5 grandkids scattered across the world. So we've got an eldest and a youngest son in Perth. The eldest has got 2 grandsons. We got 2 daughters in the UK with 2 granddaughters and a grandson. I've got a son in Sweden. I love music. I love sport. You could probably get me talking all day on any of those, but probably more to the point, like why do you love them? I think you love the buzz of people. So for me, neither are just the event itself. Part of the joy of the event is getting there, is who you meet, is what you do afterwards. Like there's a whole networking that goes around it that probably suits your style as you've got older.
A few more ice-breaking questions. So when you were at school, what did you want to be?
Oh, I actually wanted to be a Hong Kong policeman. So get more perverse than that. So I actually saw in a supplement once that they had a very good uniform. It seemed very, different and challenging. So they had a white policeman's uniform. Hong Kong looked pretty exciting. My dad had been there in the Second World War. I think I could probably visualise the tattoo he would have got in those days. So that was that. And then so really it didn't happen. There was a thought of going into the police. There was a thought of going into the military because my dad was ex-Navy. And the only thing that I had with real certainty, it was 84 and it was London, and it was incredibly exciting. And financially, London was incredibly exciting in 84. And so you wanted to get a job in London,
Yeah.
and you're a Londoner anyway, and you didn't want to miss that opportunity of what the early 80s brought.
Yeah.
And that probably just got you into something financial.
Yeah. We'll definitely go into that. If you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be and why?
There's so many, and sadly most of them are dead now, aren't they? That's one of
You
the
can include them.
There's many, there's different ones, but I think it's interesting in the job you got. You go out for dinner a lot, and you're going to go out for dinner with people that you might not know, and so you can go into those dinners with a really, really low bar of expectation that you're not going to enjoy yourself. Or you might meet someone who could become one of your best friends for the future. And so it's really interesting, because I think any dinner party you go to, you're probably going to be thrown into those situations of who would you like dinner with. So I had a really interesting one this week, which again had a low bar, if I'm really honest, but I got opposite somebody who was really interesting, that you worked out, through a couple of hours with him. His son's called Leo, he's 9, he supports Man City, the dad hates sport and has somehow got somebody who loves sport. He was ex-special services, so you sort of got a really good talk from just normal people. And maybe that's the point, you don't need someone really famous to actually get something out of a conversation. Look, and it's points of life. I would have loved to have met, someone like Otis Redding, like a father of soul, who died when they were 26, but probably achieved so much in such a short period. You can imagine spending an hour, in his time, especially if he starts singing to you as well. I think there's some really good politicians that you might not necessarily like their politics, but would have been fascinating to spend an hour with Winston Churchill. You don't have to like the person to appreciate the hour that you could have spent. I think there's some massive sporting people that like your Muhammad Ali's and people like that, who really changed people's thoughts on society. In terms of like what an hour you would have got out of that type of person. A big politician, big military, big sport, big
options.
Musician. You had a pretty fun party. I'd say.
I bet. So the third question was going to be, which sport would you choose out of soccer or football, AFL or rugby league? Now, obviously, doing some research on this, I found out that you are a huge Charlton Athletic fan, so maybe the question should morph into a little bit more Australian-centric, AFL or rugby league. Which is your favourite, and do you have a favourite team?
It's interesting you said soccer or football, which is obviously the same sport. So that's an interesting one as a POM, because you always have that challenge when someone talks about football and you go proper football or that thing you play. In terms of, they're very different. I did watch a fair bit of rugby league in the UK. Rugby league in the UK is a northern sport, sort of coming out of sort of Lancashire and Yorkshire. And then they tried one franchise in London, but I actually did go to it when it first formed in Fulham. So I sort of like sport, as I say, generally. AFL is really interesting. Again, it's an interesting sport if you've not played it. Look, you get the rules, because there aren't many. So they're quite easy to work out, wondering what the referee's got to decide on. But it's a really interesting sport if you've never played it to watch, because it's a ball sport that if you watch the ball, which is what you generally do in football and rugby, you probably miss most of the things that are happening. And so it's really easy to watch on TV, but if you go live and you watch the ball, you literally miss what happens, because most happens before the ball's got there, or most happens after the ball's left. And so I always said, AFL is a bit like, driving a car or riding a motorbike. Your periphery goes wider on a motorbike because you're waiting to see what can hit you, and you go longer. Whereas in a car, you're sort of in a car where you can be much narrower. I started in Perth. I started south in Perth, which technically means I've got to support Fremantle. But I did do a year in Sydney in '96 and living pretty close to the SCG. So I've had a season of the Swans when Tony Lockett was playing for them. So Yeah, bit
Great
of both.
season.
Bit of both, I would say.
Yeah.
It was a good season for them.
I think one of the best games I've ever been to was Collingwood in Geelong at the MCG, 100,000 people, semi-final, and I think exactly as you said, the off-the-ball stuff. It was quite an event, but quite a game.
It was my realisation, because what had happened in one of the games I saw that season, as I've watched the ball disappear up the field, and then all the crowd made this massive noise. So I've gone back and flicked back to where it was, and Lockett has just flattened somebody, like absolutely flattened,
like a freight
somebody.
trade.
And you missed it completely. Yeah. Like you'd missed it, but the whole crowd didn't leave for a moment because they knew they knew exactly what was going to happen.
I think the first time I ever went to an AFL game with all the crowd yelling out "ball," I had no idea what they were screaming out. But I gotta say, it certainly gets you off the seat and gets you in the atmosphere. And last question: what's one thing most people don't know about you?
Well, it's interesting. We sort of we've talked before, and I say it's interesting because you're a CEO, and then it's amazing how many people have got a predisposed perception of what a CEO is. And I even get people here who go, yeah, but I bet he's one of those Oxford Cambridge types. Like I've had that comment, and then somebody go, have you ever actually spoken to Guy?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting when you introduce someone. And you make your acquaintance. And so I've been very deliberate since being a CEO that I generally offer my name, and I won't go any further. And then generally you can have a conversation. The next question is generally then, who do you work for? And then you can offer that as your second point, and they'll keep talking to you. And the third one is they then generally say, what do you do? And you go CEO, and 8 out of 10 people then apologise. They literally apologise and go, I'm sorry, as though you're some sort of prince or king that's in the room. And I normally go, have I changed in the last minute since the conversation started? And then my fourth one, which I just love then throwing in, because then it really throws him, is I go, I never went to university either. And I sort of go either, because then they've really already got this. And because now they think you must have bribed your way to get the job, like, because there's like no way you should have been able to get it. And it's a bit of life lesson, isn't it? There's always reasons why people do things and don't do things, and there's always reasons why people are here and why they're not. And there's that classic lesson that, like, take the time to find the story behind a face. Like, don't pre-assume what somebody is. We've literally just done a bit of a roadshow at the office here on the year-end results, and I sort of gave the story where we did some work at Parramatta Mission a couple of weeks ago, just making lunches. And one of the stories that somebody gave me was one of the people who turned up at the mission was in a 3-piece suit with a BMW outside, and they can't judge. They're sort of neutrally religious, and they can't judge anyone. But actually, even the people that were in the mission were going like, why is this fella turning up with a 3-piece suit, parking a BMW outside, sort of stealing one of my free dinners? What they didn't know, that he was a chauffeur. The 3-piece suit was his only clothes. He was actually using the mission to eat, and he was using the mission to get a shower, because he would have, he had no play, and he was living in the chauffeured car. And so, like, just take a bit of time. It's what you might think when you've actually spoke to somebody. It could be something very different.
Yeah. So to go back to the fact you didn't study a degree, I wasn't expecting it, and I probably would have been like many people that would have presumed you did. And I know obviously you've done other studies since then, but why at that time in your life did you decide not to go down that route? And I suppose in terms of challenges, what challenges in terms of your career did you face as you no doubt went for roles and had conversations with people who made assumptions?
So I've probably got lots of stories that can spin out of this one because it's got me legs in life. Look, I could jokingly say that you was always going to be, anyone can do a degree. Most people in life are pretty smart. They can sort of knuckle down and do a degree, and sometimes you might not even need to knuckle down because it could be just 3 years spending your student grant in the student bar. So it's a different life experience. I was 18, and as I said, 18 in 84 was I wanted to work in the city. I didn't want to be 21 and have missed it 3 years later. So I knew exactly where I wanted to be. My dad had just retired, so he'd actually got a lump sum through retiring, and had never really had any money. But they were means testing grants, so they would have actually took his lump sum for my university degree, which I said, like, I'm not going to take your money, Dad, just for me to go to university. I said, if I want to go to university, I'll do that at a later stage when I wanted to. And it was never needed in the end, you know, because what actually happened is I ended up then flip it the other way. I was 21 with 3 years experience in London when my degree cohort would have had no experience. So you're already an assistant manager where everybody wants to use you with 3 years experience against someone who had nothing. And I can assure you, my 3 years in London from 18 to 21 would have been as exciting as any 3 years in university, I can assure you.
Yeah.
Look, has it played out later in life? It's played out in lots of different ways. I've been, you know, I've gone for jobs in my 30s where one of the pre-requirements is a tertiary degree when you were 21. And I've deliberately gone through the phase to actually turn that job down at the end to say, I actually don't want to work for you. If your criteria is what I did like 16 years ago, then I actually don't want your job anyway.
Well, we've got a client, Guy, and one of the prerequisites when they hire is UAI higher than 90, first time passes at university, and the marks in their CA or CPA. And as you said, that could potentially for some of these people be 20 years ago. But it's
So one of the pre-requirements when I was at Western Power, and you end up being CFO and then CEO. One of the financial recruiting requirements was a tertiary degree.
Yeah.
And so I said, I better leave. I said, because I've not got one. And they sort of looking at me. And I said, well, it was on the CV. Like, I'm here. And now I'm recruiting for you. And I said, so let's be brutally honest. I've met some pretty. Not only did they need a tertiary degree, but they needed to be a qualified accountant as well for an accounting job. And I said, let's be brutally honest. I've met some pretty poor people in life with a degree and who are a qualified accountant. And I've equally met some really good people that haven't got a degree and are part qualified accountants. There is no rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
And I sort of said, technical's great. I get that. But I'd rather employ on a personality than a technical ability. I said, because I can actually teach technical ability. I actually can't teach a personality. So I'd rather have somebody who fits in a team that's got a personality that can carry the team than somebody who hasn't got a personality that is extremely clever, but might not necessarily be smart.
Yeah.
So you've always lent to it.
Yeah.
But it's played out a few times in life. Don't worry.
So your career began in audit and accounting. What drew you to this field, and how has it contributed to the success in your career?
So probably wasn't drawn to it. So again, I think my challenge and my choice was the only firm decision you made was you wanted to work in the financial district in London. Okay. That probably lends you to, banking, financial, trading, those types of environments. So I think I literally, we're old school now. So I would have, had my CV printed, 100 times. I would have done 100 handwritten cover letters. And the responses came back from a variety of those sources. Yeah. That's what came back. I do now look back in hindsight. So I chose an accountancy firm rather than a bank, which is where the offers were. My other one that was carrying through was a Eurobond trader, which on reflection would have been pretty wonderful, but I hadn't had a clue what I was being interviewed for. But somehow got to a third interview on that one, and I wish I'd have took more notice at the time. And I actually remember losing that job in the interview because it was, by that stage, it was a 4-interview panel and you're 18. Yeah. And it was going along really well. It was very conversational. It was a really nice, and then one of the ladies literally, she went 3/8 as a percentage. Literally, that was in the middle of a question. She literally just said, what's 3/8 as a percentage? And when you divide 8 by 100 and you times by 3, and it took me, like 15 seconds to get there. And I thought, you failed, Guy. Because clearly what they were testing was how quick are you? Yeah. Like, how quick are you with your numbers? Because you're going to have to make decisions. And on reflection, it would have been nice to have answered that very much quicker, because I think I could have been then a Eurobond trader in 1984, which would have been phenomenal. Yeah. So accountancy it became. Accountancy gives you really good foundational groundwork, and so it carries you through life because you've got a really good appreciation of how numbers get put together, which means you've got a really good appreciation of the fundamentals and far more than the fundamentals of financials, which other people are going to find challenging. it gives you a really good insight into risk and governance in terms of like putting the structures and and the rounding behind those numbers. So that will always carry you through. And we all get to a place in life where we probably got a fundamental skill set, whether it could be engineering or legal or accounting. I think accounting is a really good one. I know it's boring because that's the stereotype, but don't underestimate foundationally what it will give you.
Yeah. So I saw you talk at the Utility Summit in Parramatta maybe a few months ago now, and at the start of the speech you mentioned about being inquisitive and drilling into what people give you. I think it's a skill that not everyone has, and I think, as you said, it was advice you said to the room in terms of, looking in and being inquisitive. How much did your audit background have an influence in that? Because I think as I started doing the research prior to this podcast, it was funny those two going together.
Yeah, I think it helps.
Yeah,
definitely, because I think you can either, you can audit and you can tick a box. So you can, in old money, you can tick and bash as an auditor, which means you ask a question, they give you an answer, you can move on, or you can ask a question, then do you really understand what the answer was? And so then you want to find a bit more. So commodity broking is a classic one. Like I've watched commodity brokers give an auditor an answer for a number, and I'm looking at the auditor and I know they haven't understood it, but they've moved on. So they've not took the opportunity to really dive into it. And a commodity broker will lose you in differentials and arbitrage and swaps and options, and they're pretty complicated when you really unpick it, and there's no way you should be able to get it. So you've got to ask.
Yeah.
You've got to ask. You've got an opportunity to ask. So maybe you was always the annoying kid in the back of the car that was asking your dad the questions, but that's sort of where you were. So I think, auditing gives you a really good maybe challenge to it, but I think even before that, I think your upbringing gives you that. That puts that challenge in you straight away, doesn't it?
That certainly does. We hope you're enjoying this episode of Powering Your Career. To stay updated with our latest episodes, don't forget to click follow or subscribe. Leaving a review goes a long way in helping others discover this show. For more details on West Recruitment and how we can assist you, please visit us at westrecruitment.com.au. So prior to moving to Australia, and I know you had a short stint in your role at Man prior to moving here and joining Western Power, you had a number of senior roles, so Man Group, World Duty Free, Viola and Thames Water. Which of these roles do you think was most beneficial to where your career ended up, and why?
I think they all offer something, and then probably that's why my career have moved around a bit, because, and I even say that in energy, you don't necessarily have to be an energy expert to be in the sector. You need to be a good leader. People are people in whatever sector you're doing in, and it's the people that are going to drive it. And so there are other qualities that are not the technical that necessarily get you there. So I take a bit from probably anything that I've been at. Like you've observed many leaders, some you've liked, some you haven't, but you probably don't underestimate what you're going to learn from the one you don't like, because that might be the one that you don't want to model yourself on, but you've then got to appreciate how they got to that level. Yeah. So they still had something to get there. So don't knock their style. It just might not be a style that you want to portray, sort of thing. So I think they all give you something. I go. A lot of it gave me a lot of overseas experience.
I was looking at your LinkedIn profile with the amount of countries you worked across and continents.
Yep.
You did a lot of travel. You covered a lot.
Yeah, and not just, but also in a lot of different cultures.
Yeah.
So again, you go back to being inquisitive. If you can't speak the language, you're going to find ways of connecting. You got to meet friends, acquaintances, work colleagues, because you're not in your in your sort of safety zone, because otherwise it can be a pretty boring and lonely life. People used to say, "Oh, you stay in these wonderful hotels," and I remember saying once, like, give it a go. Like, if you think it's that good, because it can be good, but a lot of people can find it really lonely because all they're doing is working all day and then sleeping in a hotel. So like, take those opportunities when you've got them, because they're yours.
Yeah.
So I used to say, like, at the Man Group, I said I was the best paid backpacker in the world. It's like it was a phenomenal opportunity.
Yeah.
And so the Man Group was really good because they wanted to work they were a top end trader of major commodities, so sugar, coffee, cocoa. They've been around since 1700 and something, when they were ED&F man sort of thing. And in the end, they floated on the stock exchange in the UK in the 90s and became the fastest growing FTSE 100 company. But they then had a policy to be operational in countries that had the commodity. So rather than just trading on the world market, actually take it from source, from the refinery, from the mill, and distribute it locally, so do the logistics or export it, sort of thing. So that was sort of something that probably suited me. So the logistics part, understanding end to end, was good for me. Probably being big and ugly, working in ports was pretty good for me. But they also had a policy where if you worked in what they termed a rough location, you got a good location.
Okay.
So, and it's interesting what they classified as rough. I didn't.
Okay. What was the roughest? Could you?
No, and I think you might have got more enjoyment and interest out the rough ones. And actually, some of the ones they classed as really good, I didn't enjoy as much.
Yeah. Okay.
So, so if I did a year in Mexico City, I got, say, 6 months in New York. Okay. But equally, if you did, time in, say, Salvador in Brazil, or Managua in Nicaragua, or Lagos in Nigeria, you might have got Singapore. I actually didn't like Singapore.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, because I found Singapore for my style, it was a bit too cliquey, it was a bit too expat-y. You weren't there long enough to build long-term relationships, and so I had more fun in Managua and Nicaragua than I did in Singapore. So have your eyes open to the opportunity that presents itself. But what overseas travel does give you, I would say, is I think 1 month in your home country, like multiply it by 6 in an overseas. So you'll get 6 months of value just by doing 1 month in an overseas location if you've got your eyes open to the culture that starts to play out and what you can then take back.
Oh, I think you can get so much in your career by saying yes, and that's saying yes to a career move, yes to a promotion, yes to a project. Very easy to say no, but by saying yes, you never know where things go.
Well, Mexico City came about. I did an audit, and there was a fraud, and it was pretty obvious. You could see the fraud that was playing out in terms of how the sugar was being purchased from the mills, and there was pretty much a lack of a paper chase. You could work it out, but you could never prove, because there was pretty much a lack of a paper chase. So then literally I said, we'll go and sort it out. That was literally it. So it was literally like, it was a Friday. Can you go to Mexico City on the Monday? Because you might as well sort it out then. Yeah. And so, and I've said that in when I've talked to sort of women in leadership teams. And I know you can be pretty selfish in some of your decision making, but it took me 5 minutes to make that decision, because someone's given me the opportunity, someone trusted me, and I said yes. Yeah. And I said, it probably wasn't until you was at Heathrow on a plane, bound for Mexico City, that one, it was the role of a CFO. Yeah. And I worked out, I was nobody's chief. Yeah. I was definitely financial, but I certainly wasn't an officer. Yeah. Right? And so I was trying to work it out. And then I thought, and I can't speak Spanish. Yeah. But I didn't care. And so, because if it didn't work out, it didn't work out. But I'd rather have found that out than not. And I'd rather have then done it on the basis that somebody trusted me with the opportunity to give it. So quite often we overanalyze the yeses and the nos, and people have got their own personal circumstances. Yeah. And I say I'm probably a bit more selfish on what I want. So I think you've got to take that into account as well. But look, always regret the opportunity that you've taken than not taking it in the first place. Yeah.
So in 2011, you joined Western Power, progressed through varying accounting roles and eventually becoming the CFO. In 2016, you became the CEO. Now, it's a transition that not everyone gets right. What were your biggest challenges that you face in this transition, and what skills or traits did you need to develop from going from CFO into the CEO role?
And there was probably a bit of a play out in the middle of that before I got appointed. So Australia's got one of those peculiar things where you act, which is a really peculiar thing, and it plays out more in government as well. And so it's interesting. I was put in as an acting CEO, never been good at acting, and so that was really good for me, because I think they use that to say, could he do it? I actually use that to say, do I want it? Okay. And so it's a very different, because if I wasn't going to enjoy it, and because everyone said, oh, you got to change your personality, Guy. You can't be as open. You can't be as, and I thought, well, if I've got to change my personality, I probably don't want to do it anyway. And so it's really good because I had 6 months where I realised I actually don't have to change my personality. And so now I can do it. And then you realise it's not that much different to other roles because fundamentally it's a leadership role. It's probably, I do joke because it's I reckon it's one of the easiest roles you get to do because you don't do any work. And I caveat that by saying that you can do long hours and you can spend lots of time, but you don't do task because other people do tasks because you build teams that are really good at what they're doing. And so all you're really doing is the orchestration of it and developing people to be able to do it. And so that's a pretty easy life in Reflect. And I've sort of said as a CEO, and it does annoy me where CEOs, you ask them and they go, oh, I've got no time, or they're never smiling, and life's so busy and so hard. And you go, if you can't smile in your role, then what hope has anyone below you got? So some of that has got to be a bit of a bravado because some days you're not going to have your best days. But come on, you get to do it. You don't get asked. You don't get asked to do it. You get the opportunity to actually do it. So,
but I think you also need to be a CEO, and I think exactly as you said earlier about being a leader, being a CEO that people want to work with, and I think a whole lot of CEOs want to build high performing teams, but if they don't like the CEO, they can't attract the staff. And I think kudos to you in terms of people and the leadership team you've been able to build, and I think that's the part of being a CEO, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you've got to take the fear off, leave your ego out the room, be confident in your own skin that you're happy that somebody could do your job better than you. Doesn't matter because then you get another job yourself anyway. But don't sort of don't close your openness. Don't be less transparent from a background of fear. Like be really confident that you're building a team that you're happy to know everything that goes on because they're probably your successors anyway. So but you've got to have confidence in your own skin to be able to do that. But you actually might find you enjoy it more.
So we caught up for a coffee. It would have been a year or so ago. I'm losing track of time, but you obviously made the move from Western Power to Endeavour Energy. I remember our coffee chat when you described your challenging transition from Perth to Sydney. COVID was hitting. You had family members in tow. Could you share? And I hate sort of remembering about or talking about COVID again, but you've got a very interesting and complex story about transitioning into a CEO role in a different state in the middle of COVID.
Yeah. So my challenge was I should have had family members in tow, and I didn't. So I was the last plane out of Perth as COVID hit. So that was an extremely full plane coming in from Sydney to Perth, and I reckon there was 3 of us on the plane back. And I deliberately, you could see what was happening with COVID. You could see Australia was shutting down. So I joined 2 weeks earlier than the start date from that perspective. And so my sort of first observations of Endeavour was I sort of had a very large campus-style office in Huntingwood in Western Sydney, and I got to know the security gate lady Suzanne really well. I got to know the cleaner very well because I reckon you could count on 2 hands how many people were in the office. So I didn't know my team. I didn't know the people who worked for Endeavour, and obviously that changed. And equally then, I didn't see my wife for 9 months because I couldn't get back to Perth, and she couldn't leave Perth because she wouldn't have got back in. So we didn't see my son, who was sort of 16 at the time. We still have the standing joke because she still is probably pretty aggrieved that I left her with a 16-year-old son. But I do flip that with I did leave her with my old English sheepdog, so I still feel she got the better deal if you actually join the dots and put the whole package together, because I didn't have my old English sheepdog.
But did the English sheepdog join you for the second part of lockdown? I remember
so
you being locked
got
in.
over. So he got over eventually. Lockdown had pretty much finished. It had pretty much finished by then. And so the added complication was then my eldest son then was relocating to Perth, which then my wife thought, because she'd not seen him for a fair amount of time as well, so then she used the excuse to stay in Perth for another 6 months because she'd not seen him for a long time. I think she just didn't want to see me. I think that was the real truth of the matter. But yeah, but again, you adapt.
Yeah.
Like you work through what you have to deal with. In some respects, COVID was then interesting because I found, people can be very precious about their calendars and meeting people. COVID actually, you probably got to meet people via Teams quicker than you would have, possibly because they were bored at home. But you had the ability to actually put a name and a face together because you did get some sort of Teams call times with them, which is not a perfect relationship, but actually then when you finally met them, you at least had a leg in the door. So it wasn't all bad. You just adapted the style. We still had operational depots that were functioning. So even though the office staff generally didn't come in, again, I had a great ability to go to the depots because we did have people there. Okay. So I could drive somewhere. Yeah. So again, I think I got out in some respects more in a different way to the depots. It's just I didn't see the office staff. There's pluses and minuses in life on lots of things.
So in 2020, you mentioned obviously transitioning into the role at Endeavour, and your role was to transform the business, and it's had a big focus in terms of innovation, empowering your people, a focus on the customer safety and sustainability. You've achieved a lot in terms of being the successful operator of the Central West Arana and the JV there. Can you run us through that journey over the last 4 years, and what has Endeavour Energy achieved, you and your team have achieved over the last 4 years that you're most proud of?
Look, I think you always come from a people background, and so trying to get the most out of people, and then that drops you down in a culture. Culture's a lovely word. I find it hard to describe what culture is. I'm sure if I was academic, I could do. But so culture for me is walking into to a room as a CEO where people can talk to you, that they smile, that they're happy, that they tell you their story. So I haven't got an academic sentence that describes culture, because culture is what you hear, culture is what you see, and you feel what it is. I think is where it is. So I think that's the most pleasing thing, because I think we've created that type of, culture within Endeavour that people enjoy working here. They're comfortable having conversations with people. They're comfortable challenging people in a safe environment. They're all them foundational pieces that let you do the other things. Yeah, we had a very much an agenda that nobody really knew Endeavour, and that was probably very deliberate, that they didn't want to be known, because being known also means you get the risk of being shot at as well. Whereas we said, no, you've got to be known. If you want to be in this transition that's happening, it's a customer-led transition where your customer's going to be your hero. They better know who you are. If you want to be trusted with a reputation in the amount of change that's going to go on in Western Sydney and Greater Western Sydney, and really, the whole of the geography that Endeavour sits in, then you've got to be a bit noisier and you've got to be a bit louder. But you've got to try and balance that with a bit of listening and with a bit of empathy. So you've got to get the balance right. And so there was a very deliberate, targeted, tactical approach to get us all out there, which I think on the majority people have enjoyed. Like, it's amazing that people haven't actually in the business not enjoyed that. That can create a bit of discomfort at times. That means you're going to have to listen to someone who's not always in the best of moods, but hopefully by the second or third conversation that you've given enough information that they understand, all aspects of a situation, that they're in a better position. So, I used to we didn't even have a Facebook account, which was really interesting for me at the time, which is really interesting because by the time we didn't have it, Facebook wasn't even the main medium that you needed anyway. Like, kids were using Snapchat by that stage, but we didn't. But the reason we didn't have Facebook is literally because somebody might say something nasty about you when you post, and we said, Facebook it will moderate itself. So yeah, you will get a bad comment, but if it's a bad comment that doesn't get moderated, it's probably bad for the right reason. You better do something about it. If it's a bad comment that other people on that platform start to say, like, oh no, they've done a really good job, leave them alone, etc., then you probably don't need to do much about it. But don't hide your head in the sand to say that you're perfect, and that, because you're never going to hear about what the comment is. But that was probably the reason of why we didn't have it, is because in some respects we probably didn't want someone to tell us we weren't very good. And so, but you can turn that into a positive and let it play out. And we clearly use those social media platforms highly now, and so we should.
You're obviously doing a very good job. Last year you were recognised as one of Australia's best CEOs in the prestigious CEO of the Year Awards. And having recruited for Endeavour for many years, you've certainly built a culture that attracts good quality people, and the people who work here are enjoying it. We hope you're enjoying this episode of Powering Your Career. To stay updated with our latest episodes, don't forget to click follow or subscribe. Leaving a review goes a long way in helping others discover this show. For more details on West Recruitment and how we can assist you, please visit us at westrecruitment.com.au. Now, Guy, in life generally, and also as a leader, you have good times, you have challenging times, and in a video you recently recorded, in your own words, life serves you lemons, or serves you a lemon. On January 29th this year, you faced a significant challenge in a Melbourne hotel room. Can you run us through that?
Yeah, I can. Well, I sort of can, because it's only what somebody tells me now, which is my wife. So, look, I had a seizure at the end of January 24, and so it was a Saturday night, Sunday morning. It's about 1:30. My day has been as normal as it had been the 30 years previous. I'd gone through a normal day where I'd had a 10k run in the morning. I thought my time was quite good. I used to do that quite often.
What sort of times per minute were you going?
I'm old, and I'm not, and I'm far badly shaped for a runner. So I used to like being around sort of early 40 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
So like, yeah, if I can get sort of the fours rather than the five,
you well surely got me covered.
Then I'm happy. But I'd done that normally. So so I'd gone out for the night. Very typical, had a good night. So literally came back, and then about 1:30 in the morning, apparently I suffered a seizure. So I actually know nothing about it. So I know nothing until I woke up about 6 hours later in Alfred's Hospital in Melbourne. So I know nothing about a paramedic appearing. I know nothing about the ambulance journey. It just happened, and I think that's a good reflection, because I think one of your reflections is it's probably not what you have to do, it's probably what somebody else has to see, and it's probably far worse for the person seeing it than the person dealing with it, if you sort of really appreciate that. And it also makes you think, I think I'd be atrocious at having to handle it the other way around. I don't think I'd be best at handling it the other way around. But anyway, so I'd had a CT scan. They said, clearly something's gone on. It might just be one of those things that that's it. Like, we can't really pinpoint what it is. But obviously get to see a specialist when you go back to Sydney. And so we were in the train of doing that. And then on the 10th of February, I suffered a double seizure. Some of it sort of mirrored. I'd gone out for a good night. I'd saw Paul Weller at the Opera House on, I think it was a Friday night, and I'd actually got through the night, woke up, and I remember my wife saying I'd normally walk the dog by then, and she wondered why I'd not walked the dog, but she said we'd got in late, and then I had a seizure about 8 o'clock in the morning, so I collapsed there, and then suffered another seizure when the paramedics was sort of present. But again, know nothing about it. Don't know anything about sort of what happened, and similar situation. I woke up in Westmead Hospital a bit later, because it was worse than the first one. So I think the first one was saying you got a problem. I think the second one was saying no, you actually have got a problem. You need to sort it out. And so by that stage, you're then rushing through the diagnostics, which pretty much was you got a large bleed at the front of your brain behind one of your eyes, and you got to deal with it. So you effectively suffer a bleed and a sort of a mini stroke, and you've got to deal with it. And then you're sort of in just the mode of, you're in the hands of somebody who's an expert that you've got to trust. You're in the fact that you're lining up what you've got to do. We took an option as a way of curing it, which in hindsight didn't work. Which is basically an embolization where they go up through your groin in a highly technical way to sort of repair the bleed, which is pretty much sort of gluing the bleed, which sort of worked as I came out of the operation, but a day later I literally went blind in one eye. So then they sort of went back in to discover what had happened, and really what had happened is they sort of solved most of the bleed, which is good, but unfortunately there was still a bleed occurring, and then you'd obviously got a bit of oxygen sort of starvation on an optic nerve that caused the blindness sort of thing. And so you're sort of then still in that motion. I won't go through my sort of tale of woe, because there's a few things that played out, because you ended up with deep vein thrombosis, but in the end I had the main operation, and so the operation they didn't want to do, you had. So that was in April. That is the crash, that is the one that people sort of want to avoid. Not because it's an unsafe operation, just because it's pretty invasive, because they will split your head, and they do need to drill a bit of bone out your skull to get there, which they need to clip back in. But funny enough, it was the most successful part of all of it.
Yeah.
It was the most invasive, but the one that was probably easiest to recover from.
Yeah, okay.
And the one that went, from a success outcome perspective, the best.
Yeah.
And I say, you reflect a lot as you go through these things, because that's what's naturally going to happen. And I think mentally you get in that space where you will you're going to wake up on some days and you're going to get the why me. You're human, and you're going to get to that why me. Yeah. So because that's one side of the curve, it's one side of the line. But you've got to get closely to, but it wasn't me, if you look at the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So there's lots of worst case scenarios. The most common diagnosis for somebody who has a seizure in their late 50s is you're going to be in a waiting room waiting for a consultant, and they will probably tell you you've got a brain tumour. That's probably the most common one. I didn't get that. I survived both of the seizures, which is pretty lucky as well. That could have gone completely wrong. I could have had a seizure not in the middle of the night. I could have had it on the M4 driving a car. That didn't happen. And as I say, if you stay that side, and then you look at the person in ICU that's next to you, and you go, you're not actually in pain. I didn't suffer pain. I suffered, a pretty quick indication of what I had with an operative solution of how that was going to be cured. And you watch to the person next to you in ICU, who's probably just had 6 months of chemo, still doesn't really know their diagnosis, has probably had a brain tumour removed, and you go, like, you're pretty lucky. Come on, like you've come out of it pretty well. And then hopefully you can tell your story. Because then hopefully you can, because I think what does get you through is like be positive, be happy, be appreciative.
Yeah. And I was going to say, is that the life lesson? Is that the lesson you learn off the bat? Like, not the lesson, but there's
loads of lessons you learn, but if you take those ones, they are.
Yeah.
And just think of it from a human being, like a nurse has got to deal with some pretty serious problems day in, day out. And she's going to deal with some pretty miserable people. Miserable probably for the right reasons. Yeah. If you're happy and you're talking to her and you're in a positive frame of mind, who would you rather spend time with? Like, so even if the selfishness is to get the nurse to look after you, that's not a bad lesson. Like, but it's for the right reasons, because you appreciate what they've got to deal with, what they've got to deal with every day. So you've got to be positive to what's out there, and that's you can't judge what people go through. Like, so don't be some smart that can think they can judge, because everybody's circumstances are different. But all I'm saying, to get me through it, it helped me. That's we're all different. Like, we've all got different personalities, but I know what helped me get through.
You mentioned about watching you go through it, and I think I shared this part that my mother-in-law, and I got a little bit emotional a second ago when you said that, because my mother-in-law had a similar thing 12 months ago, a stroke, and we were sitting in Goulburn, and her speech. She started vomiting and ended up getting rushed to hospital. And it was.
The first time I tried, there's various ticks that you need to or various milestones you want to tick off. Like you want to fly again because I love travelling. Yeah. You'd love to drive a car again, so you'd love to go to the gym again. So there's various ones you tick. So the first time I went overseas, my wife came with me, but that was for her. Yeah, because she didn't want to leave me in a hotel. Yeah. So it's just a really interesting one, because that was for her. That wasn't for me. I'm fine. I've been cleared. But she wanted that. And there's been a couple of times in the night, you've literally just gone to the toilet. I'm 60. I need to go to the toilet at 2 o'clock in the morning. But it's really funny because then suddenly she'll get bolt upright and then she'll shout, "Are you okay?" And I went, "I'm just old and I'm in the toilet." I said, it's like there's not a problem, but that's in her head. She's seen you collapse, and that's what's in her head, isn't it?
Well, I was very pleased to see you at the gym the other day, and I'm pleased to hear that you're sitting here having this conversation with us and sharing your story. So thanks for sharing that. To talk about your career once again, so what do you think was the best career move you ever made? And additionally to that, was there a mistake you made along the way? And did you what lessons did you learn?
It'd be pretty sad if you didn't learn lessons.
Yeah.
So again, I can't cherry pick one in terms of that. There's ones we've talked about that, like, take the opportunities that are presented to you. Don't overthink them. I think that's played out in my life a lot, and that's worked for me. It might not always work as well for each other, but that's certainly played out for me. Look, there's loads of things you learn, both sort of from a work perspective, from a personal perspective. I've been with Sharon for 25, 26 years. But I was married before, so again, travelling a lot, puts an enormous strain on a marriage. So, and it is very interesting that if you look at your career, and I've done this before, where you've sort of put your timeline of where you're working, and you'll see, God, he was a CFO at 28, and he was a finance director here. They could be the darkest points of your life without people realising it. But you might have, so people might not know that happened when you were going through a divorce, but you threw your life into work just to get over it, or just to blank it out, because you didn't want to really face what was going on. Yeah. So there's lots of lessons that you'd go, hindsight's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Could I do it better second time round? Yeah, you could. But that also means that, I haven't got regrets for the way I did do it. Yeah. Because you've learned by doing it. Yeah. So I wouldn't say I'd do it differently. I'd just say, I wish I could have handled some of it better at the time with more experience.
Yeah. I've been recruiting in the energy industry for 10 years now. I think it's fascinating. It's so fast paced, so complex. Like the fact that your customers are also your suppliers. Like there's so many things in the industry. What do you personally love about the energy industry, and why is it an industry that people should look at joining?
So as I said before, I fell into it 10 years ago. I've only ever worked in it since I've been in Australia. So I feel pretty fortunate. I feel I've landed in a time that's suited me, because it's got masses of change playing out. So I think you'll be a lover of change. Not everyone is. And that's very different to probably what was happening 30 years before. So that's a very different style that's sitting in there. I love the fact that it's suddenly customer focused to customer obsessed. Yep. So again, I've joked before that I don't think 10 years ago we even knew a customer existed, let alone we were focused on them. Yeah. So getting to that stage where it was all about what we engineered to provide for you, but it was our choice what you got, and my joy is engineering that thing for you. So I think, there's been some massive strides that have gone out there. The last 5 years have been even more fascinating, from a top end of, as we transition out of fossil fuel to a renewable source at a top end, as we develop a battery to store that, fundamentally different. As we then use data and automation in that 5 years, which has still got so long legs to run, we're only really at the start of that one. And then if we go into distribution space where we've got, as I say, a customer who's actually a generator, who's going to be supplying us with the generation that's coming off their rooftop, possibly helping us with some of the storage that's playing out. Like you've pretty much thrown every toy out the pram and starting again from that perspective. So you couldn't be in a more exciting place.
Yeah.
And not as an engineer as such. That's not just an engineer's role. That's somebody who's a data specialist. That's somebody who's financial. I don't think you can say it's just for an engineer that it's now exciting. Somebody who's got real focus on customer, community, sustainability. Like, what a place to have a career. Like, it's, don't think it old money now. Think it new money.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating sort of 5, 10, 15 years ahead from where we are at the moment. The energy transition's crucial for Australia's future, the world's future. What does the Australian energy industry need to get right, and what do we need to, avoid to ensure a successful transition?
I think, look, one of the ones for me is don't get fixated on one solution, because I don't think there is one solution. So I think, if we really want to learn something, don't throw all your eggs into, what could be transmission. Don't throw it all into storage. Because to really not get through this cycle, but to actually get to 10 years time where you're really providing, an affordable, safe and reliable solution for a customer that uses the opportunities that are out there. Like, be really open-minded to the solutions that are out there, because it's going to be a combination of all of them. So it's not going to be just the really big projects that get us through this. And one of the challenges on the really big projects is, like, life will show you that they're generally going to be more expensive and late. That generally is what happens on a big project. So, like, there are so many opportunities to use. So I think that's one of the lessons that we can really learn. I think, look, Australia's got a unique opportunity that the world is even looking at because of how they've adapted in certainly rooftop solar and storage and things like that quite quickly. And I think we can learn more things from maybe other countries that may be farther in front of us on, say, electric vehicles and the use of data. So there's a bit of both of it. But people are looking at Australia to say, you've got a real opportunity to lead the way on this transition. I think we're on a journey. We've done some things well. I think we've got to do other things better. Don't just blame government and legislation, because that's a cop-out. It's interesting. I've said in life, very few people in life have said, I can't do something. Generally you can do what you want. A challenge is then, how do we get that to scale? Because I think we're going to be able to do lots of things, but our challenge is then, can we actually run really quickly once we say this is where we want to go? So, but don't blame, that legislation hasn't caught up, or the government needs to do X, or because it's in our hands, and it's all of us to undertake that. So the opportunities are there. If you've not got certain people over the line, then you probably need to lobby and work a bit harder, don't you?
So I specialise in energy recruitment, and one of the questions, or the question I get asked most, is how do I transition from my current industry into energy? That's where I want to get into. I see a potential. What would your advice be? How do people, whether it be in telco or in banks or in other industries, make that transition?
So I've got a bit of a curveball on this, because I've always said that you shouldn't be energy specific. But I appreciate people are still going to be fixated on it. So somehow you've got to get a bit of a balance. So I sort of say, bring your enthusiasm, bring your leadership, because that's pretty generic. Bring your people skills, because that's extremely generic. And so get enough of energy, but appreciate that you might not have 30 years experience, but if you've got 30 years experience, 25 might not be that relevant now. So think about what you actually need going forward, which is not what the 30 years has given you. One of the, you can honestly say, like, the people who are in charge now that could be in charge going forward are the ones that didn't spot the change that was happening. So, you can say, should it be different people? So I think it is important you get different people in the industry. You needed some you still need a foundational piece of experience sitting in that industry. But I think it would help the industry if there were different thought processes coming in that can adapt to what's happening, because then we're not just talking about the physics of what's changing, we're talking about the culture that's changing, we're talking about the softer skills that needs to make this successful. So maybe I'm an outlier in some respects, because as you say, I'm the one without the degree, and but you don't need as much sector experience as people think. It's how to convince the person who's recruiting that that's actually not what they necessarily need.
You've touched on this in a few times, but what skills should people be developing in your mind to be successful in the energy industry? You mentioned data, and I've seen you on a few speeches mention that, but what other skills should people be really, really focusing in on or developing to have a successful career in this industry?
So again, I think it depends what level you're coming in at.
Yep.
So there's a career trajectory of where you are in that sort of path in your life. Be really good at what you're good at, which is very technical if you're coming in at a certain level. But if you want to keep moving up that sort of chain, then you start really developing some soft skills. I think if you get your soft skills earlier, like, your technical gets better. Because if you get them earlier, you're convincing other people the solution, aren't you? As opposed to imposing a solution on you because you're the smartest person in the room. And so a lot of that starts to play out. So I think energy, coming in lower down, then you've got to be technically very good at what you're doing. But I think your defining factor might be you're therefore going to be up against lots of people that are technically good. So what makes you stand out? It's probably then not going to be a technical, is it? So what else are you what layer are you going to offer that gives you something else? So we need to convince a lot of people to do something differently. Then have you got that skill to do that? Because you won't get your solution across the line if you haven't got the whole of the business across the line. So it's a myriad of probably things that you might need to adapt to. Yeah.
So my last question, Guy, is around mental health and wellness. So it's very close to myself. I have my own mental health challenges, as do my family and people around me. I think it's very, very important to talk about, and you talk about it's not weak to speak, and Rob, who's in the room now, is wearing a shirt that encourages tradies to talk as much as they can. I find in my business, which is obviously much smaller than the team you've got, Guy, but the more I can talk about any challenges I have, the more accepting staff are in terms of being open about challenges that they face. And I think it's been a really big open thing. And I think being the person you are and not hiding that we have good days, we have bad days. Now, obviously, you've gone through a challenging period, whether you can open up about those challenges or what you've gone through in terms of sort of your mental health and wellness over the last 12 months, but also from an Endeavour side. Why is mental health and wellness so important to you, both personally and for the business that is Endeavour Energy?
Look, so, I mean, your character's always been very open, and so as you've sort of got to a role like a CEO, you've got more opportunity to sort of share your stories and to share your vulnerabilities, because you're not embarrassed by them. Like, it is what it is, sort of thing. And your head's an interesting thing. Like, most people, you can understand your physical, elements that go wrong in your body. You can see it, you can feel it. Most people don't appreciate your brain and your mind in terms of what that is, and most people think they can cope with it better than they probably in reality really can. So you're in a fortunate position because as CEO you can explain it, because you're no different to anyone else, but you've probably got, luckily, a wider remit to sell it. And so that's not a bravery thing. That's just like you're fortunate to be in a position that you've got a wider audience that can sell it, because you're no different to anyone else. And so, I think people don't really appreciate their mind, and they sort of shut it out much easier. And we all have our different coping mechanisms of doing it, but hiding it's not the coping mechanism, I can assure you. That's and even the video I did on LinkedIn, people say like, that was really brave, guys. It's a really great, it was a really great video. I also did that for me. That was for me to offload, because I'm waking up at 2 o'clock every morning, through a combination of like, what's been going on and some pretty interesting drugs that they give you. So you're the only one who wakes up in a dark house at 2 o'clock in the morning, and your mind goes mental, literally. Pardon the pun, but so you sort of want to wake up and go, I need to offload this, because if I don't, it's going to chew me up at 2 o'clock every morning, sort of thing. Because you are going to get that bit where, why you get the why me, and you might stay longer there than you should be staying there. And so, like, you've got to offload and get yourself into a safe place to do it. Most people aren't judgmental, you'll find. So it's amazing once you start telling your story how fortunate you then become, because they'll tell you this, they'll tell you their story, because now they feel safe. So it starts to perpetuate, doesn't it, in terms of what you can achieve. So look, I've never had a problem saying what I want to say on anything. So, and I'm not embarrassed by what you think. And there's been periods in your life where it's been really hard to deal with, and you've wrongly thrown yourself into work thinking nobody will know what's going on, but most people know what's going on. So it's just, I think you all need a very good mechanism to sort of release the pressure, to talk about it. Like,
Is that your outlet? Is it talking, or?
Talking helps me. Definitely talks to me. And then, because then I think if you get another story, you appreciate, like, somebody else is different or worse or better, and so that sort of helps the whole situation. And I've come from an era like, my dad was born in the early 20s, like put that into perspective. He was 17 when the Second World War started, where he was he's in the Navy, like. He suffered massively in the 50s through not talking about what happened to him, and a lot of that generation took it to their grave. So that wasn't good. That's not a good way of dealing with something, is it? So I think our society has got much better at allowing people to be open about what's going on. I'm hoping that generations are feeling more comfortable to do it. But we've still got a massive issue with like teenage suicide. We've got a massive issue with it. We've got a massive issue with indigenous health. Both mentally and physically. But so we've still got so much more to do. In some respects, the newest generation is probably just as bad as my dad was in the 1940s, because what they're seeing and how they're dealing with it is probably not the best way of dealing with it, but they feel them under even more pressure than maybe we did growing up, sweet and innocent in the 1970s. Sort of thing.
And they're probably not having as much exposure to each other, face to face, one on one. So much is over technology these days that you can't pick up, or maybe ask your mate, how are they? How are they doing?
So I feel like in some respects we've made. We've made those sort of, without stereotyping, we made the tough old blokes in their 50s and 60s a bit more open, but I think we've not realised there's still a problem building, back in the food chain earlier on, that we need a lot more, got to do a lot more work on it.
What's one tip you do for your own wellness?
Look, I mean, I do like a routine, so people laugh at me because I'm incredibly sort of disorganised, but that's through choice, because I don't like process very much. But sitting underneath that, there is routines that help me through the day. So and it's funny how words now come up with like meditation and things like that, which you've sort of never done, but you've done in different ways. So look, I've always liked getting to work early, not necessarily one I am an early person, but it also clears my head for an hour. I really like, and that doesn't mean I think about work, but that means I clear my head for the hour. I always used to like going to the gym, and we'll get back much more better into that process, because I could run for an hour, and my head's my own. I can listen to music, because then you listen to the lyrics in a song, and so there's little techniques that you use yourself. You read a lot still, because again that gives you learning. So they're all little bits of release mechanisms. I think there's touching in with people, you know, even if it's a small text, like you've probably got much better at that more recently, to say that, you know, like it takes you seconds to do a quick text or seconds to do something quickly on WhatsApp or something. And so you've got a big circle of friends that you can touch more often than you think, and it doesn't take as much time as you think. So there's lots of different mechanisms that sort of get you through the day. As you've got older, you've got even more confident in your own skin to talk. So all of those things play out.
Yeah. Well, Guy, thank you so much for being part of the podcast.
Thank you.
I feel we could probably have talked for another hour or so, but I know you're a busy man, so I'll let you go. But thanks for being part of the first podcast. And I've been mentioned, or I've been told that I need to say at the end, if you like this podcast, subscribe, share, and like it. But no, I really appreciate your time, Guy, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Powering Your Career with David Smith. Join me next time as we talk to energy leaders to provide you valuable perspectives on career development, leadership, navigating the energy transition, and strategies for managing mental health and wellness in a high-pressure industry. If you are enjoying this series, please click follow or subscribe for further episodes. And leaving a review or a comment helps others find this podcast. Also, if our team can assist you with any recruitment requirements, or you are keen to discuss your career journey, please reach out to West Energy or West Recruitment at westrecruitment.com.au. Thanks.